Here's how my images often build up. At the bottom, I'll have the original picture. Above that, I'll have my retouching layers. Usually it's just one layer, but on occasion it's more than one because sometimes there's something I'm not sure if I want to retouch out. Like maybe I'm not sure if I want to get rid of these little boxes up here, and I might decide to bring them back later. If so, I'll create another retouch layer just for the boxes so that I could always turn them back on if I want to later on. Then above that, I have adjustment layers that are fine-tuning my image. And in this case, there's just very subtle changes being made with adjustment layers. Here we're lessening the blue in the window. And here we're making the yellow in the surrounding building less colorful, because I want your eye drawn to the red door and the guy. But you end up building up your adjustment layers on top. Retouch layer below. So in this particular image, to do this retouching that's there, the main thing that I would do is what I showed you before, is on the edge of the frame. I know things that are called heel are probably going to screw up. I could either insert the content that should be there and then do it, or I could use the content aware fill to try to do that. Right here, I'm probably going to have to copy from this stuff up here. I mean, here I can just do it. I'll do it on a fresh layer. I would use the normal clone tool. Here I'm going to copy from this stuff and just put it over here. We need a seam there, so I'll copy seam from right there. And then here I need the proper brightness if I'm going to use the healing brush. Get it in there. And then right here I need the proper stuff. And that's where I need my brush to not be soft edged. I need my brush to match the edge of that stair. So I don't want a mega soft brush. I'm going to get a hard edge brush, probably just one step away from the hardest. So up here, my brush is about 75% of the way to a hard edge. And I'll copy from up in here somewhere. And I got to be laser precise so I don't get any overspray on the stairs. What we were doing here is we were trying to get the area that we're retouching surrounded with proper brightness, proper color, proper texture even. And right there we had to be absolutely precise because we didn't want it to blend in with the edge of the stair. We needed it to abruptly stop at the edge of the stair. So it's doing some there. And I just needed to keep going a little bit. So let's put in just one more little transition down here. I don't need a hard edge brush down here anymore because I'm not going to stop right on the edge of something. Up above I was stopping on right where the stairs were. And I'll just put in. Okay, so now I have this area surrounded by proper brightness, proper everything. I can try to use my spot healing brush. Trying to retouch out a big shadow, in case you didn't know what the goal was. See if it works, but it might copy from stairs because this is a tight area. Okay, it messed up only a small area, so give it 3 chances. A little smaller area. And then wherever it doesn't look right, give it a second chance. And we're not doing too bad there as far as being able to get rid of parts of the wall. If you want to see, that's what I just got rid of. Up at the top, I could manually do it because it's so blatantly obvious what I could copy from if I wanted to. I could use the normal healing brush. Just option click where that seam is because that's what's important, is the seam remains. And this is where I might use a really huge brush to see where would the seam go. Get it to line up, to say where would that seam need to end? Right about there. It's on the right level where the seam would go. I click just to establish that that's where I want to apply things. I choose undo because I didn't actually need to apply that big of an area. And actually it didn't lock it in. I'm not sure why it didn't lock it in, but usually it would. And then I can come in here and apply it. When I'm done is when I would use the spot healing brush afterwards to get rid of anything that looks like a blatant repeat. So break up into little, wherever you see blatantly repeated content, get it so no longer looks repeated. You get rid of more of the shadow. and so on. So anyway, you get the process. Surround it with the right stuff, then start healing in the middles, all that kind of thing. Let's see. Also, on occasion, I'll have spectators in an image. I don't have an example that is that. Instead, I have cars. But sometimes what I'll have is, like if you go to, for instance, a house designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's the middle of the day, there's always going to be people walking around it because people go there as a tourist attraction. If I want to be able to get rid of people in that kind of an instance, what I might end up doing is taking more than one photograph. And if I take more than one photograph, here I'm not going to use all of these because I don't think I'll need to. If I use just 2 of them, I'll often come in and do load files into Photoshop layers. And if I didn't use a tripod, then these layers might not line up. And so after I'm done doing it, I'll select the 2 layers. And I don't know if you remember, oops, I'm not sure why I switched out of Photoshop there. Okay. I can do auto align layers. Click OK, because if they weren't shot on a tripod, they're not going to perfectly line up, but now they're going to be close enough. And if I hide the top layer, I'm just looking to see if the text remains in the same position. And yeah, it looks like it does. It's kind of fun to do that. Then I'll just work on the top layer, and I'll add a layer mask at the bottom of my layers panel. I'll grab my paintbrush tool, and wherever I paint with black now, I'll hide this layer and reveal the layer that's underneath, and I'll just paint where that car is, because I wanted to get just an empty street. That, and I'll paint up here where that car is, and now I was able to get rid of that. So oftentimes with spectators and things, I put my camera on a tripod, I take a picture, and I wait for people to move a little bit, take another picture. Wait for them to move a little bit, take another picture. And for a really busy place, I might need 10 pictures though to effectively be able to get rid of them. In this case, if I take that mask and I invert it, that means make what's in the mask the opposite of what's currently there, I'll have more cars instead. And I just need to crop out this little edge. That's because I was not shooting on tripod, and that's how far my camera had moved between shots. So it would just need to crop that out. But I can either get more cars or fewer. All right. What else do we got in here? We have red eye. It's not the... The problem is trying to find images that have red eye. If you know how to prevent red eye in the first place, then why would you take a picture with it? So this is actually a very old picture of my wife and her sister. It just happens to be one with red eye. There are a bunch of different ways of trying to get rid of red eye. One of them is there's actually a brush designed for it. If I come over here, there's the red eye tool. With the red eye tool, I can click on the red eye, and just one click, and it will try to target that area and change it. Now there is some settings at the top of my screen called pupil size and darken amount. Choose undo here, and if I just target that, if it doesn't get enough of the red eye, if it doesn't extend out far enough, I can adjust the setting called pupil size. Increase it, and then click and try again. Or if it was extending out and affecting parts of the skin, like too much of the image is changing, I could reduce it. Then we have the darken amount, and the darken amount is how much darker is it going to make that area. If it ends up looking like it's pure solid black and that ends up looking artificial, I could bring down the darken amount to tell us to do less of it, and then when I click, I'm going to get a lighter looking end result. But we have our red eye brush. I don't think she's got too much of it. So that's one option. You could also, instead of using the red eye tool, you could instead go to hue and saturation. And in hue and saturation, you can tell it to work on the reds and you can bring down the brightness and bring down the saturation. But then you'd have to paint on the image on your mask to say, don't affect the skin, don't affect anything else that's red, only do it on the eyes. But otherwise, we can try it using just our red eye tool. Yes?
Then is the hue and saturation thing how you would fix pet eye?
Pet eye, yeah, you can, because pet eye can be green and other colors, and so we could target it again with hue and saturation, and you lower the brightness and you lower the saturation, but it's going to affect everything in the entire picture that is that color, so with the green eye. So there's a mask attached to any adjustment layer you use, and so usually right afterwards I invert the mask. What that means is turn the mask black, and then I just paint it right over the eyes. So that means it's only where it happens in those areas. You don't have to be overly precise with painting it in the eyes, because in hue and saturation you can target a particular color. So it's just a matter of make sure you didn't get it onto anything else that would need to be the same color. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you make a loose selection with a lasso tool, for example, around the eye or the pupil or whatever is red, couldn't you then not
Yes,
desaturate? And
yes, before you go to hue and saturation, you could make 2 selections around the eyes. They wouldn't have to be overly precise. They just need to contain the eye and nothing else that is of that color where the red eye is. The problem is skin is similar in color to the eyes, and so it would need to be relatively accurate if it's on a human. If it's on a pet, though, and they're having their eyes come out being green, unless it's a green pet, you can make a pretty loose selection around their eye before you do the hue and saturation adjustment layer. And if you do, then you don't have to go through the rest of that process that I mentioned. But with humans, the problem is skin is in general the same color as red eye. It's just a lot less colorful. And so if you make a really crude selection, you're going to notice the skin's getting less colorful as well. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Glare for eyeglasses.
Glare for eyeglasses. A couple things. Well, first off, oftentimes, unfortunately, I don't have an example of that here, but if you have glare on glasses and there's only one of the 2 eyes that is glared, oftentimes you have to literally copy from the other eye socket, flip it horizontally and rotate, sometimes scale, to get it to be used for the other eye. And then it's a matter of putting it in. Other times with glare, you mainly have to do what I just mentioned, copying the other eye and flipping it, if the glare is so bright that it's white, where you cannot see the detail that's in there. If it's just slight glare, instead of it being like a light source, like a photographic softbox kind of thing sitting there that's doing it, instead it's just a bit bright, then oftentimes an adjustment that adds contrast in there will break through some of that glare. So it depends on what the end result looks like. The problem is if you have glare across both glasses and it's really bright glare like from a softbox in a photo studio, if you can't see the detail of the eyes, we need something to copy from. And so oftentimes what I'll end up doing is I'm going to photograph somebody and I'm getting glare on glasses because of the light source being right in there. I'll have them take one shot with the glasses up and then one shot with it down, so I have content to copy from in order to retouch some of the glare or lessen it. We don't always have that as an opportunity, though, so sometimes we really have to search for what to copy from to put in there. Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I've covered pretty much the images that I have here. So in this case, let's see, what would we want to retouch out? In this case, let's see if we can get rid of the shadow that's casting onto the building that's here. Let's just say for some reason it bugs you. I'll get rid of the portion of the shadow that's down here first. And so, new layer. All I'm going to do is isolate where the shadow hits the stairs. Do you see, like where the shadow is hitting some unique detail? And I'm going to try to create separation between the two. So I'll copy from just to the left of it using the clone stamp tool. And here's where I need to use a relatively crisp edged brush because the edge of that stair ends abruptly. So I need my brush to end just as abruptly. Otherwise, I'm going to have this slightly soft stuff extending over onto the stair. So I'll end up putting it in like that. Then I'll copy from just below where this is, so it's the right brightness. Put it in right there. Okay. Then over here, I need to separate that as well. All I'm trying to do is isolate the thing that needs to be retouched from the important details that are around it that it bumps into. So I would need to put some of that in. And then I need to isolate one more spot here. And I don't mind so much that I'm copying from close by. Usually copying from close by is not a smart thing just because your eye is good at picking up repeated texture if it's really close by. But I need the brightness to be right, and that's why I'm copying from areas that are very close by in order to attempt to get the brightness. The only other place that shadow is bumping into something is right here, so I'm going to try to also separate that. And once I've separated it where the problem is surrounded with the proper texture and everything is when I can either go to my clone stamp tool or I can go to that edit fill thing. I might also break this right down the middle to make it 2 chunks. Just like that. Now, spot healing brush should be able to nail it. This one I could break in half if I don't feel like tackling the entire thing with one chunk. Like that. And then spot healing brush. And then this one, spot healing brush. And then look for any repeated content. And if you have any, paint over it. So anything that's obviously repeated. Usually it's more unique content, like a brush stroke that you recognize as seeing it twice. But otherwise, we have gotten rid of that shadow. And we could do the same thing up here. It's just a matter of looking at where does that shadow bump into something else. Right along the edge of the building, right there it does. It bumps into the sky. So I'd need to insert a little gap on the ends of wherever the shadow bumps into the sky. I'd need to put little gaps where the shadow bumps into the stair railing, where it bumps into the stair and all that, just so it's surrounded by the proper brightness. Then I can break it up into little pieces and get rid of it. So when you're breaking up, you're using the clone stamp tool. You're copying from very close by because the brightness and color needs to be right. If I copy from too far away, the brightness and color ends up being off. If I want to get rid of the line, if I don't want to get rid of that line, when you get to stuff like this, you need my brush to match the edge quality of that wire if I want to keep the wire. So if the wire doesn't have a soft edge on it, my brush shouldn't have a soft edge on it. One trick is if you click, you can hold down the Shift key and click somewhere else, and it will connect the dots between the 2 areas where you click, as if you painted across. But in this case, I probably didn't want to paint quite as far. And I can do the same thing over here, copy from here, click right about there, hold Shift. Oops, that Shift key doesn't work actually. My keyboard I'm working with had water poured into it at some point, and the Shift key on the left side of my keyboard is inoperative. And then healing brush, spot healing brush that is. Spot healing brush. And I can continue with that, keep going and going. But anyway, it's the same process often for all sorts of complex retouching. I could spend the time to get rid of that, or I can attempt to select it and use that one. I doubt it's going to do an amazing job here, but imagine I had this selected. I could attempt to do this, but it's probably going to do a pretty bad job of it. And so that's why when you know it's going to do a pretty bad job of it, you break it apart and make your tasks smaller. And the clone source panel can be an amazing resource there if you need to copy from things that seem to be almost impossible, because it's like, well, okay, but I could copy from one area. If I just flipped it and rotated it and scaled it, it would work. You know, you can start doing that kind of thing with that clone source panel. So yeah. Any questions, comments, anything else?
Yeah, we have a question about, after using the healing brush tool, how do you make the healed area look less smudgy and more in keeping with the previous texture?
If you're using anything with the word healing attached,
Yeah.
try to use a hard-edged brush.
Okay.
If you end up using a soft-edged brush, it will look all smudgy. What happens is you're forcing the edge to fade out, and it doesn't have control all the way out to the edge. If you use a hard-edged brush, completely hard-edged, not slightly soft, but completely hard-edged, you'll find it looks better. And so I'm assuming your brush is either slightly soft or a fully soft brush, because that's when it starts looking weird. Soft brushes are things that I use more when I'm using the clone stamp tool. And so that's part of it. But without seeing an image, it's hard to say exactly what the look is they're getting.